Manafort could be hoping for a pardon from Trump as fraud conviction looms. Former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort, facing fraud charges for allegedly hiding millions from the IRS and failing to declare overseas bank accounts, is gearing up for the second week of his trial. The 69-year-old is the first person implicated in special counsel Robert Mueller's inquiry into Russian collusion to face a jury, and the past week has not gone well for him. Manafort has been painted as a liar, who would rather spend his money on an opulent lifestyle than pay taxes. Next week, his right-hand man Rick Gates will testify against him as part of a plea deal Gates made with Mueller. Gates is expected to provide jurors with the first-hand account of a co-conspirator, and say Manafort was knee-deep in an alleged scheme to hide millions of dollars from the IRS and defraud several banks. As Manafort's chances of a not-guilty verdict appear to rapidly shrink, his last hope for freedom lies in the president. Trump has worked to distance himself from the case, noting Manafort was with him for only a very short time, and that he had no idea there was an investigation into his behavior. Paul Manafort worked for Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole and many other highly prominent and respected political leaders, he wrote on August 1. He worked for me for a very short time. Why didn't government tell me that he was under investigation? These old charges have nothing to do with collusion, a hoax. Hours later, the president appeared to calm himself and changed his tune slightly, this time referring to his former campaign manager as a Reagan/Dole darling and suggesting mob bosses received better treatment than he did. Looking back on history, who was treated worse, Alphonse Capone, legendary mob boss, killer and public enemy number one, or Paul Manafort, political operative and Reagan/Dole darling, now serving solitary confinement, although convicted of nothing? Where is the Russian collusion? He wrote. While this case has very little, if anything, to do with Russian collusion, many within Trump's camp believe Mueller is trying to convince Manafort to help him gather more information on potential collusion. Going to trial instead of taking a deal could be seen as an act of solidarity with the president, and could curry his favor should Manafort require a pardon or commute a sentence. A pardon would not be out of the question for the former campaign manager. Trump appears to have a track record of using his powers to help his friends or send messages to his opponents. In April, Trump pardoned Louis Scooter Libby, in a move many saw as a signal to those being called up by Mueller's team. Libby, who was then Vice President Dick Cheney's chief of staff, was convicted in 2007 of perjury and obstruction of justice after leaking the name of a CIA officer to the media. He was sentenced to 2.5 years jail, but President George W. Bush granted him clemency, meaning he did not have to serve his sentence, but the conviction was not overturned. When Trump announced the pardon, Democratic Representative Adam Schiff took to Twitter to share what he saw as the true meaning of the pardon. This is the president's way of sending a message to those implicated in the Russia investigation: you have my back and I'll have yours, he wrote. Trump has also pardoned conservative commentator Dinesh D'Souza, who was sentenced to 5 years probation and 8 months in a community confinement center in San Diego for making illegal straw donations to the campaign of Wendy Long, who ran as a Republican for a New York Senate seat. A straw donation is where one person flouts campaign finance limits by having other people make the donation on their behalf, and reimburses them the money. The president said D'Souza had been treated very unfairly by the government. Former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the recipient of Trump's first-ever political pardon, was convicted after violating a court order to stop racially profiling Latinos. The 85-year-old continued to detain people based on suspicion they were in the USA illegally, something a judge had specifically ordered him to stop doing, noting he was not authorized to make such arrests. Trump pardoned Arpaio before he could even be sentenced, telling reporters he was loved in Arizona. He's done a great job for the people of Arizona. He's very strong on borders, very strong on illegal immigration, Trump said. I thought he was treated unbelievably unfairly when they came down with their big decision.